So we will now move to our closing keynote speaker. Leni Mayron Christensen is the sustainability leader at GE Renewable Energy. She leads GE Renewable Energy's sustainability programs to achieve carbon neutral operations and develop the company's product and wider value chain sustainability strategy. Prior to her role at GE, Leni served 10 plus years in the LM Wind Power's Communications and Sustainability Department, leading LM Wind Power to carbon neutral operations in 2018. Today, she will discuss how GE Renewable Energy will pursue a very aggressive carbon neutral goal, which includes decarbonizing its own operations. She will also discuss how sustainability is a catalyst for business transformation and innovation. Please join me in welcoming Leni Mayron Christensen.
It's a brutal name. Thanks, Ginger. I really appreciate it. Good afternoon, everyone. I see there's already a hand raised. That's amazing. That's the kind of engagement we like. And I'm happy to take questions along the way. We don't have to save it for the end.
Okay.
I can be very flexible. I think for this fairly modest group, I think we can definitely make it quite interactive along the way. But let me start sharing my screen, and thank you for the presentation. Now I don't need to do that piece for sure, but I did bring a few slides, and let me just see if I can make that work. We usually work in teams, so I apologize if it's a bit clunky when I try to share on Zoom. Can you see it?
So we sleeved your slides, they're just not in presenter mode.
All right, let me try that then. All right, better?
There we go. Yes.
Now I can see you. So I would have loved to be able to see you at the same time, but maybe I'll need to compromise there. All right, so that's me. That was a brilliant presentation, very thorough. So I'm really struggling to bridge elegantly from what I just heard in the poster presentations. This is going to be much less technical and much more a practitioner's view on how you implement carbon neutrality in practice in a large industrial company. And so I do represent GE Renewable Energy, but I'm able to talk a little bit about GE's wider commitment as a group for carbon neutral operations for 2030 as well. And so you're welcome to ask. But my role is in GE Renewable Energy. Just a very, very brief highlight. I'm sure you all know GE, just a super short summary of the businesses in there and where I belong in the renewable energy branch. Growing, of course, also because of this world's need to decarbonize. So our products are becoming incredibly relevant if they weren't already. And it also compels us to take our own medicine more, I would say, which is one of the reasons why we have a carbon neutral commitment as a company, and many other reasons which we can touch a bit more on as we go. So actually, Larry Culp, our CEO, announced GE's carbon neutral 2030 commitment on my birthday last year. And I tend to think that was not a coincidence. I was very, very pleased to see our big group with 1,000 facilities worldwide actually commit to carbon neutral operations by 2030. And it is quite a large ordeal. And I say that knowing very, very hands-on what it means and what we need to do. And also the challenges that we're facing in that journey. So as Ginger rightly pointed out, there's a big component of transformation and change management as we drive this forward. And we're also operating in a world that is changing incredibly fast. And so I think every business right now is going through that process of realizing that business as usual and the way we've done decision-making in the past may not necessarily be the way we can do it going forward. We have to be a lot more flexible and respond to changes in our environment that hasn't been there before to the same degree. But there are some very specific ways that we're going to decarbonize GE's operations over time. So of course, the first step is to measure and understand what are the carbon emissions that we do have from our energy use, from our electricity purchasing, from our company vehicles. And then we are going to reduce as much as we possibly can using all of GE's, and especially this lean effort that Larry has introduced, with very strong force across the business as one of the drivers for finding efficiencies and reduce waste. Because at the end of the day, carbon emissions is really a form of waste from our activities. So it becomes this lens through which we view our operations and the processes we have in the company. And we find ways, because we want to get rid of the carbon, we also end up finding ways where we can optimize the way we work. So just zooming in on GE Renewable Energy for a second. So it's a fairly big company in its own Right. And so my background was originally from LM Wind Power. I was acquired into GE in 2017 when LM Wind Power became a blade supplier in-house for GE. GE was already a big customer for LM back in the days. But in LM Wind Power, we already had a carbon neutral commitment when we were acquired. So actually LM was the first in the industry to be carbon neutral for its operations. And I tend to think that we inspired actually the wind industry to follow in many ways. And then it's becoming quite mainstream for the wind turbine manufacturers, for instance, to have these kinds of commitments because they see it makes an awful lot of sense for the business we're in. But in GE Renewable Energy, we have the broadest portfolio of solutions for the energy transition. And it's exciting and fascinating to be working in such space. It's also complex because the businesses we have, the value chains we have, our sites differ, of course, depending on the product they supply and where we sort of sit in the value chain with our customers. There are many, many interesting challenges, but also opportunities. A snapshot view of the very, very dense and exciting journey that we've been on. So actually we announced, I believe in 2019 externally, that we would be carbon neutral for GE Renewable Energy. So it was Climate Week in New York. We made that announcement. And I think it's fair to say that of course we knew what we were doing because we were leveraging the knowledge we had from LM Wind Power. And of course we do know quite a lot about how to deploy renewables and stuff like that, but still there's an awful lot of learning in such a process, in all of these steps, which I've tried to list sort of in a kind of a process way. So we, of course, again, we had to account for emissions, a hugely time-consuming, challenging exercise we have to do and where we need to continuously improve every year. The reducing emissions piece, we had a very clear view that we wanted to do it cost effectively to the extent possible. So surprise maybe to some, but there are not really great margins in a wind energy company. So we were very, very cost conscious, but also we knew we could do that. I mean, driving energy efficiency, for instance, really also comes with annual cost savings and improves our operations. So the emissions reductions and the cost out go hand in hand. And that's been sort of a fundamental driver and principle, if you like, for where we start and how we prioritize. And it's quite natural for many companies. But I think we've also proved that it actually works that way. The same for how we switch to renewable electricity contracts. So of course that is very close to our heart. And so we've also tried to combine this with our commercial interests to the extent possible. And I'll go into that in a second when we deep dive a little bit on some of these elements. And so we reduce as much as we can, and it's an annual exercise. Obviously, we switch to renewable electricity to the extent possible, and then we'll have to compensate for the remaining emissions through carbon credits to achieve a carbon neutral status for the business. And so we knew we would have to do that. We also knew we would have to have a fairly large proportion of offsets, and we will need so for many years if we want to maintain this commitment. Because it's very time consuming, because sometimes it's super challenging to actually remove emissions and completely change the way you operate. It is a long and multi-year transition and transformation journey. And underlying that is the ability to engage, of course, the relevant stakeholders, both internally and externally, and also again, come to the realization that you cannot necessarily do everything yourself. So even in big and amazing GE, we do have wonderful talent and also very specific technical capability within renewable energy adaptation, etc. But it's still different when you need to do it for your own business. That's, I think, at least something that we've learned. And so the employee engagement component, the constant education, the sharing of the vision, and again, being able to articulate what is the value we're driving with this commitment to the various audiences, both internally, but also to some degree externally, has been a pillar or a fundamental component of the program. If you're curious about what a carbon footprint distribution looks like for a big industrial company with these 7 businesses that you saw on one of the slides previously, this is an example from GE Renewable Energy. So this is 2020 distribution, and as you can see, there's a big chunk of logistics. So I'm sure in this community, you'll be familiar with the scopes 1, 2, and 3 from the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. so I won't pretend that you don't at least. And so that you can see in the pie chart, we have scope 1 at the top right corner and scope 2 at the bottom, and then you have the rest is scope 3. And for us, because we move around the stuff a lot, like big components for wind turbines, the logistics piece is really the single biggest one, and it's a scope 3 emission. So it's not part of the wider GE commitment. It's something we're doing specifically in GE Renewable Energy, because we know it's material for us, because our customers are also very interested in this, and some of them have their own commitments to decarbonize their value chain. And so we want to be able to support them in that journey. And obviously 2020 was a weird year. And we've operated with 2019 as a baseline year. And we did see, of course, I would say some COVID impact. We were very sort of keen to see what exactly that would be, but it was actually mostly on employee mobility. So how people got to work or not, obviously, because we were all working from home all of a sudden. And our business travel dropped significantly, but actually our operations more widely kept running and were only closed down for smaller periods of time. We still served our customers and got products out in the field. So that was very, very positive. And then in that difficult environment, we did manage to implement some specific projects in our manufacturing sites, in the more carbon intense ones in India and China, for instance, and in Turkey. I'll show you a few examples in a second, and that we could actually also read that in the numbers. So there was an actual reduction from 19 to 20. I always like to joke a little bit about this carbon footprint exercise, and you know how hard it is to build it, how time consuming it is compared to how visible it is. I mean, now I just showed you the pie chart, which is one of the potential outcomes, and it's helpful for telling the story, but there's so much work going on behind the scenes. So there's just a little snapshot of some of the numbers and, you know, the data points that we're crunching to get there. And there's a lot more. These are just some of a selection for you to check. And so obviously we also try to continuously improve and make that process more smooth. We investigate, or, you know, we have to mine for data in the most incredible ways. And I personally get quite excited about that, because we really get to understand how we operate down to the nitty-gritty details. And because we will have a different view on our business across the board than anyone else in the company, just because we're on this mission. So that's kind of cool. We are talking a lot about green lean internally when we talk about this decarbonization effort that we're on, both because honestly, we don't want to confuse people. We do have a huge lean drive sweeping through the company, and it's really important for GE. It's one of the strategic programs running through, but actually it's super compatible with driving decarbonization. And so we have these very specific examples for how we reduced emissions in our manufacturing sites, which we call green lean, because actually it is. I mean, it's driving efficiencies, for instance, in how we use our energy, and finding, you know, different ways, different process, reorganizing some of our equipment, for instance, for heating and cooling. And it's not rocket science, but actually, again, back to the point about having this change mindset, you need to have that goal in place, or that bigger vision for people to relate to, in order for them to also do this on top of their day jobs. We don't have a huge team installed to do this, actually. But we did find some really interesting projects in the local sites all over the world. So these are just a selection, as mentioned, but actually one of the selling points, if you like, is of course that they would like to decarbonize their operations, but they're also getting annual cost savings. So all of these projects were paid back within a year. For going green, our electricity use, then that is fun. And back to what business we're in, this is really where we take, I would say, the medicine of our customers as well, and to really also get an understanding of the energy market in a new way, from a new angle, because all of a sudden we are off takers of green electricity, and we're trying to figure out what is the most attractive option in all the markets where we operate. And we do have operations in 80 countries. So it's quite a challenge, and it's a very dynamic picture, which is again, it's fun, but it's also quite difficult, to be honest. There are, of course, regulated markets, And the regulations will differ and be quite complex. It will be related to tax, it will be related to transmission system operators. It can be all sorts of things that you didn't necessarily think you would have to deal with. And so you'll need to map out the stakeholders for each of these projects in each of the countries, and sometimes down to regions. You will recognize that for the US, I'm sure. But we have an example right now in India, for instance, where we're switching to green contracts. And we have operations in 3 different Indian states. And so we'll have to deal with 3 different types of regulations for getting that done. And in one of them, there's a cap on how much renewable electricity you're allowed to buy as a corporate, because they also want to protect the existing power operators, power providers. So that's just interesting. You have to sort of get to know that as you go. What are the limitations, but also the opportunities? So in India in particular, we are deploying green lean again, I would say, and actually identifying, well, we're saving thousands on switching to green contracts, these long-term power purchase agreements, which are also driving demand for our products overall in the market. So we have some good customer stories coming out of this too. And we try, of course, to help get new renewable energy capacity online, ideally GE turbines or other kinds of GE equipment. As you saw, we had the big portfolio there. And then we'll have to cover the rest with environmental attribute certificates, or RECs, as you call them in the US. And it's an annual thing where we'll look at the portfolio and how much can we cover with PPA, where can we install something on site. So currently we have projects ongoing in Spain, in Turkey, in Vietnam, and some of them are combinations of long-term power purchase agreements and on-site installations. And, you know, it really differs again on how much then of the site's consumption we can cover. But that part of the planning and the decarbonization is also run from my team and our local sourcing. The carbon credits and the offsetting is always, I saw you had some really interesting presentations on the topic previously, and I'm sorry I couldn't actually join them. It's always a source of interesting conversations, at least in our company, and people are very divided on the topic of whether they're really useful and valid and all of that. We partnered up with leaders in the market to make sure, of course, that whatever we buy is legit. We try to also align our purchase of offsets to where we have commercial interests. So we'll be bidding in countries where we'll be asked whether we support local community development, for instance. And so we'll try at least to see if we can align our offsetting needs to that. And so we're quite pragmatic about it, to be honest. And of course, we also have the energy transition story as a core theme where we possibly can. But it's not our preferred mechanism. We're using it as a driver of change, a transformation lever, if you like, because all of a sudden you'll have a price on carbon internally. You'll make it quite visible that if we don't do something to actually remove emissions in-house, there will be a cost, even though we support really great projects. You know, there's a lot to be said about carbon financing, and it really does, you know, add value in many, many ways. But as a company, of course, you are, as a starting point, more interested in trying to optimize your own operations first. To the culture and education and engagement piece, I was very excited to see when we started this journey a couple of years ago now that local sites really stepped forward, and you know, there were local employee groups who had sort of done stuff on site to help green their own location in various ways. It just wasn't organized in any way, but a colleague stepped forward and said, I'd like to lead this and create a global green teams network. And so that actually spread into other parts of GE as well. So now it's a recognized enterprise, what do they call it? Enterprise resource group, I think, something like that. And it's quite cool because it's growing constantly, and it's helping to drive this critical piece of culture and education. Again, back to the point, one thing is you need to implement stuff and really technical and specific projects, but you have to have a culture that sort of follows and enables people to understand the why, and also allows them to contribute. If you want it to grip and become something that is embedded into your culture and hardwired into your organization, this is a critical component. So I was really, really pleased to see this, and I work closely with these groups and try to nurture and inspire them in any way I can. And sometimes I'm lucky they do a little bit of work for me too. A peek into what the future might look like. So when we talk about carbon neutral operations, and we had deliberately in the headline for this session, and beyond, we know already that carbon neutral operations is not going to be sufficient, neither in terms of helping the world meet its decarbonization needs, but also because we are very directly being asked by customers. We see specific regulations that are pointing in that direction. And so we know we need to look at our wider value chain, and we have started that. So what you're seeing on the slide right now is at the left-hand side, our carbon neutral operations activities and these ongoing work streams that we have to address our operational emissions. And then at the same time, we are about to launch quite soon a supply chain sustainability program. And so gradually getting our supply base into, if they're not already, and many of them are, to be fair, into a structured sustainability process, or where they set targets and where they improve and align ideally with what we, but also their other customers will need. So this comes sort of through the value chain, and we see some clear headlines, if you like, or themes that are aligned, of course, with where there's a lot of carbon in the value chain. And we also see opportunities from that, and think we have a responsibility. So we're sort of getting organized now to figure out how do we address it in a good way and build it into the way we operate, make it a standard expectation of our suppliers that they join us on this journey. And then at the same time, of course, we look at the products and how we can design them with sustainability and the whole circular economy in mind from the outset. And we have a lot to do. I mean, we're not perfect in any way at all. So that's one of the things I'm spending quite some time on, figuring out how do we actually do that then, and then leverage also all of the existing activities that we do have, because we do have a lot of great stuff going on around blade recycling for wind turbines, for instance, which is a hot topic in the wind industry regularly. We have a very good alternative to SF6, and we're partnering up with other industry players to allow them to use it, because it's actually so significant in terms of the reduction impact. And so we have many things where we can also partner up with others across the value chain, or with universities for that matter. Again, recognizing that no one can solve this challenge alone. We'll need to come together in new ways. And so my little team, which is hosted in our CTO office, is actually one of the catalysts for that, currently in G Renewable Energy. All right. That was actually it for sort of from a pure presentation perspective. I hope I didn't miss any questions, but I actually couldn't see you as I was going. Stop sharing for a sec. All right, there you are.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'll open the floor to the attendees for questions. Anne, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. That was really fun for me. I'm from a GE family, a dad and 3 brothers, so all the way back from Appliance Park days. So I was really excited to hear about this new side of GE. You may have answered this, but I'd like to try to tease it out more specifically. Some of our earlier speakers were talking about mission-specific offsets where, for example, a university already has a relationship with a place in Africa and they send solar lanterns as a way to cut down on the carbon emissions within that area where they're already working. So GE Renewable, you have all of these products. Do you ever, through GE Philanthropies, like in my dad's day, if he gave money to the Red Cross, GE matched and they gave money to the Red Cross. Do you have an organized philanthropic program where you actually donate know-how or you donate some of your products as offsets?
No, is the short answer. But we do have, of course, the GE Foundation, and we do have this One Young World network talents that volunteer some of their time to work on SDG related topics. And so they are deploying their skills and their efforts also to decarbonize for other organizations from time to time. But no, we don't. But I really like that idea. And maybe we should.
It seems like an obvious fit that you could just you could do all your offsets by just giving what you already have with some training or some training centers in areas that need it, where you would teach people how to install them or repair them or whatever.
I really like that idea. I'll make a note. I'll bring it home and check.
I did have one other question, if I might. I get a lot of comments, wind is doing so well that of course the naysayers have to find a way to bash it down. And their biggest thing is the blade recycling. Can you get a little bit more specific on the success you're having with that?
Yeah, so we partnered up with an external company, specifically in the US. It's called Veolia. I think it's actually Finnish origin, but it's a global company. And they treat the blades that we have that come down from the big repowering projects in the US. And it's not a full sort of circle loop recycling solution. It's cement co-processing. So the blades will be shredded and incinerated, and the materials will be used in that process. Some of it will go into the cement, and some of it will be used in the incineration process. And with that, you get a lower carbon cement product. So when we did the LCA on the solution, it was a 27% lower carbon intensity from the cement. So it's a step, I think, in the right direction, and probably the only commercially viable solution on the market right now. But we are involved in a number of different research projects, and we have been for years, also in the LM Wind Power part of the business, where this is sort of hosted and owned. So we have two drives. One that looks at how do we treat the blades that are currently spinning and are coming down at various pace, some of them sooner than they're actually built for because of the repowering and the economics of that. And then how do we design blades for the future, where we think about recyclability from the outset? So we're part of both industry consortia that looks at that, and one of the most promoted ones, if you like. It just kicked off, so there are no sort of outputs yet, was something they call the Zebra project, which is LM Wind Power, so the blade side of GE, and with some other industry players in the value chain. And they're basically going to design a blade that should be recyclable based on thermocomposites. And we do expect quite a lot from that, but it's a huge thing potentially, because it's going to fundamentally change the way we manufacture. And with that, our entire manufacturing footprint of 15 LM Wind Power blade sites all over the world that are built, to do things a certain way. So again, it's a long process, but it's incredibly exciting. And so we need to do it. I mean, it's not really a choice.
That's great.
So I saw that, one of your key components is onshore wind. Is GE Renewable looking at offshore wind?
Oh yeah. Yes, very much. So GE currently has the biggest offshore wind turbine on the market. So the Haliade X, huge 12 megawatt machine, and we were also the first to install offshore wind turbines in the US. So the Block Island project is with GE turbines. So yes, we definitely have offshore business, and we see that as a great growth potential, or the growth part of the business. Again, that's incredibly exciting. So the US is one of the main markets. Of course, Europe is quite mature, and we do play all over those regions, and looking at Asia as well. So China has some extremely ambitious renewable energy targets, and also specifically for offshore. So we do expect we'll deploy the Haliade X there too. So yes, is the short answer. And oh no, you have to know that. Absolutely.
All right, are there more questions from the audience?
Yeah, so this is Subhash, and yeah, I'm glad Anne and Ginger covered the area of wind. We actually have a collaborative project with GE that looks at tall wind, and that is going pretty well. And I'm very happy to sort of be involved in that particular activity. One of the things that is interesting is the embodied energy, and I'm sure you coming back from that same area. Do you look at you touched upon developing new material systems for creating these structures for the next generation. So do you look at the ideas related to reducing the embodied energy when you are actually manufacturing these things?
Yes.
Yeah.
A very, very early stage. So part of building up our product stage, the third pillar you saw on one of the slides, is really implementing a structure and a process for how we do this systematically. So implementing our ability to do life cycle assessments on a regular basis and building to our NPI process is one of the things we're working on right now. And yes, we know we will need to work on the embodied carbon, and so it also links to the decarbonization of our supply chain and how we partner up differently with our suppliers, starting to assess them on different parameters than we had in the past. So of course, we will always have cost and quality and delivery as part of what we look for with our supply chain. But we are also increasingly looking at alternative supplies, because we know we'll also need to have alternative materials or different ways of putting them together to meet sustainability goals. But it's early days, I would say.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
All right. Are there any other questions from the audience?
I hope you didn't fall asleep.
Oh, no, it's really great. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed that.
Cool.
All right. Well, thank you, Lainey, very much for joining us. I know it's very late as you're joining us from Denmark. So thank you again for giving us a wonderful presentation.
No problem. Thanks for the opportunity.
And so with that, I would just want to thank everyone for taking the time to join us over the past 2 days. We hope you've enjoyed the discussion, and please join me in thanking all of our presenters for providing excellent presentations. The recordings for all the talks will be posted on our website sometime next week. And thank you again for joining us and making this year's symposium a success. I hope you all have a great weekend, and tomorrow is World Environment Day, so I hope you enjoy it and do something special for the environment. So thank you very much and have a good evening.
Take care, everybody.